Arthur sat on the edge of the tub, the bathroom light humming overhead. He reached back, his fingers finding the spot between his shoulder blades. It was a marble, hard and unyielding, buried just beneath the surface of his skin. He pressed it. No pain, just a solid, foreign presence where there should have been only muscle and bone. He spent the next 10 minutes cataloging it. He traced the edges, mapping the circumference with his thumb, trying to push it aside, but it remained fixed. He had spent years tracking every minor ache, every stiff joint. But this was different. This was an intrusion. He stood up and turned to the mirror, twisting his neck to catch a glimpse of his own back. The skin was smooth, unbroken. He turned off the light, leaving the room in darkness, but the sensation of that marble-like hardness remained. By the second week, the lump had doubled in size. Arthur stood before the mirror with a plastic ruler, measuring the protrusion against his skin. It was no longer a marble. It was a dense, expanding knot that pushed his shoulder blade outward. He pressed his palm against it, and the mass fought back. Then, he felt it. A rhythmic throb, steady and insistent, pulsing beneath his touch. He checked his wrist, counting his own heart rate, then compared it to the beat in his back. They were out of sync. The growth had its own life, its own tempo, a mechanical ticking that vibrated through his nerves. He lay in bed that night, unable to find a position that didn't aggravate the pressure. The throb grew louder, a dull, wet sound echoing against his pillow. He reached back, his fingers trembling as he traced the apex of the swelling. The skin felt thin, stretched to the point of translucence. He pressed down, and a sharp, stinging heat flared across his back. He pulled his hand away, his breath catching in his throat. A tiny, jagged white point had pierced through the flesh. He stared at his blood-stained fingertips. It was a tooth, sharp and unmistakably real. By the fourth week, the growth had sprouted a full set of molars. Arthur sat in his kitchen, the fluorescent light flickering above the table. He stared at a glass of water, his throat dry, his mind occupied by a single, desperate need. Before he could even form the word, thirsty, in his mind, a raspy, distorted whisper emanated from his back. Thirsty, the voice mimicked. It was his own cadence, his own pitch, but stripped of all humanity, sounding like dry leaves grinding together. Arthur froze. The sound crawled across his skin, vibrating through his shoulder blades. He turned his head, but there was nothing behind him except the wall. He reached for the glass, his hand shaking so violently that his knuckles turned white. The voice chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He jerked his arm back, and the glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and shattered into a dozen jagged pieces. Arthur stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the linoleum. He turned toward the door, his eyes wide, and began to run. Arthur sprinted through the clinic corridors, his breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. He slammed his shoulder against the door of the examination room, bursting inside before the doctor could react. The room smelled of antiseptic and cold metal. The doctor did not look up from his chart, his pen scratching against the paper. Arthur stepped forward, his movements erratic, and he pulled the fabric away from his shoulder. The mass was there, a pulsating, toothy cluster protruding from his flesh. It moved with a life of its own, the molars grinding together. The doctor froze. He dropped his pen, the plastic clattering against the linoleum. He leaned in, his eyes wide. He pressed a stethoscope against the growth. The sound of the clicking teeth amplified, a sharp, metallic chatter. He turned the lock with a sharp, final click. "It is not a tumor," the doctor said. "It is a twin." The doctor did not move. He kept his back to the door, his fingers white-knuckled against the frame. He looked at the growth, then back at Arthur, his eyes reflecting a hollow, paralyzing dread. "It is hungry," the doctor repeated, his voice barely audible over the wet, rhythmic grinding of the teeth. Arthur felt a sudden, sharp pinch at his shoulder blade. The mass surged, pushing harder against his skin as if responding to the word. It was not a growth, it was a passenger, and it was demanding sustenance. Arthur reached back, his hand hovering inches from the teeth, but he could not bring himself to touch it. The reality settled into his marrow. He was no longer the sole inhabitant of his own frame. He was a host, a source of fuel, a cage for a predatory sibling. The doctor slid down the door, while the thing on his back began to chew.